Welcome to another lesson and semester of East Main 101. I am your facilitator, City of Jackson, Tennessee Communications Director Kenneth Cummings. And kicking off this semester, we have, for Lesson 16, City of Jackson Building and Codes Director Greg Rowland. Greg, welcome to East Main 101, Lesson 16. I'm excited to talk to you about building and codes. A lot of people might not understand how it all works for a building and codes department here in the City of Jackson. So we've got you to talk about it because you're the man. You are Greg Rowland. We'll start off, of course, with a quick bio. Greg Rowland started with the City of Jackson in 1996 in the building department as electrical inspector for both residential and commercial projects. In 2004, he moved into a plans examiner role, and we'll talk about that later, where he checked plans for code compliance for new construction projects in Jackson. Along the way, he was acquired and maintained 18 International Code Council certifications, as well as achieving State of Tennessee Building, Fire, and Electrical Inspector certifications. He is also a licensed master electrician. Currently, he's the Director of Building and Housing Codes since 2017, and all 28 years with the city has been in the building department. Greg has been married for 33 years and has 2 adult sons. He is also an avid outdoorsman and loves playing slow-pitch softball. Greg Rowland, thank you for coming on to East Main 101.
Yes, sir.
Again, I'm excited to talk to you about building and codes because people think building codes, what does it mean? What does it do? What's your point for here in the city of Jackson? So
Right.
we're going to start off right off the bat. What is your department's role in the progression of our city, and what authority do you have in inspections, and as far as what your department does, what authority do you have?
Okay. First off, thank you for having me, and shout out to my department. I think we have a great team down there. The role of the building department, we have collectively we have a building department, then we have a code enforcement department.
Okay.
The building department, we're there to we review the plans, blueprints, as you will, plan review. We look at it on paper before they actually start building out there and out where they're building. Our role there is to look at it on paper, make sure it's code compliant before they ever dig the first shovel of dirt, and we follow that project all the way through, from the time they dig the dirt, they pour the concrete, to the time the walls go up and the electrical wiring goes in, the plumbing goes in, heat and air, fire protection, anything that makes that building a completed product, we follow it all the way through. Our other department is code enforcement, and that's we have 6 districts. We have 6 inspectors, 1 for each district, that takes care of blighted properties, overgrown grass, you name it. We've probably seen it, but that's our other department, is to do code enforcement.
So you say you start from the ground up. So if I want to build a building, whether it's retail or a house, I have to stop by the building department to make sure that I am in compliance, or what does that even mean? Why do I need to stop in the government building to make sure my building is right?
Right. If you have a piece of property out here and you want to build a house, first thing you do is you come to us and say, hey, I want to build this house. Well, that has to be, we send you down to planning, because there's setbacks. There's property lines, and you have to be so much of a distance from the property line, so much distance from the road. And once they say it's okay, then that's when we take it over, and we look at from the ground up. It could be dirt one day, and then you got a finished product months later. So that's kind of been our role, is that that's our part of it, is the code enforcement part, or the code check part of it.
So it's every step of the way, from the dirt to foundation to the piping, plumbing, all the way up to the final, here's the key to the house.
Every step of the way. Yeah, we see a dirt field, and the next thing you know, it's a finished house with someone moving in it. That's right.
And so you talk about code compliance, and again, you are for homes, residential, and you're for buildings, for retail, or anything that's essentially built in the city of Jackson that's going to be occupied. Building department and codes department has their hand in it. You talk about code compliance. What are some of the compliances, or if that's even the word, for making sure a building is safe?
Yeah, we as a exempt jurisdiction, Jackson's one of the exempt jurisdictions that basically that is, we're exempt from the state. I mean, we have enough certifications and qualified people that we have our own building department, here in Jackson. And so we have adopted codes that we have to adopt probably once every 6 years. We have to adopt a new code, and we apply those codes when somebody wants to build something. That's our standard is the code, the adopted code. It tells you how deep to dig that footing, or how far receptacles have to be spaced apart, and what size plumbing pipe and what size air unit do you need for that house. So we take what you want to build, and we take the code and we apply that to that.
Okay, and you mentioned every 6 years. Is there a reason why it's every 6 years, or is that just kind of a standard across the board?
As you mentioned earlier, you mentioned International Code Council. They are the institution that writes the codes, and they come out with a code every 3 years. But as the City of Jackson, we have to be within 7 years of the latest published edition. That's according to the state. So it falls usually every 6 years we adopt a new code. We have to study it, look at it, and then when it's time for adoption, that's when we adopt. We couldn't do it every 3 years that they come out. It just wouldn't be feasible. We want to take time to look at it and stretch it out as far as we can to help the contractors. They get into a mode of building it this way. We don't want to just, throw something new out there.
And so, again, every 6 years you study them, you're looking them over, all these codes. How big of a change has it been? You say you've been with the building department for 28 years. That's a long time, just in numbers, of course. I'm 38, so I was 10 when you started. You talk about how y'all study the codes and make sure they're all up to date. What have been some of the, biggest changes since you started? What's, one code from 28 years ago to now that has been one major change?
Yeah, one major change, and I'll stick with residential homes.
Okay.
As you know, we live close to the New Madrid Fault, which is the big earthquake that happened near Reelfoot. So a lot of the codes that are changed is to make houses, withstand earthquakes. So a lot of the changes are seismic. They're hold down straps, like I said, from the ground up. When they pour the concrete, they're hold down straps that would keep that house, from collapsing in the event of an earthquake. So seismic stuff is a big thing. Also, Jackson has had its share of tornadoes. We've seen them, and a lot of the codes it applies to a house, keeps that uplift from a wind like that. And so we're building safer houses, stronger houses that will withstand storms, earthquakes, and that type of thing. That's the biggest thing. It's a lot more structural stuff to these homes.
And it's funny you mention that, because I would think that a lot of the homes, you hear people say they don't build them like that anymore. A lot of the homes that I see that are almost historic, they're built brick and they look like they can withstand earthquake and tornadoes. But it's like now you're saying that one of the biggest changes is making sure that these buildings are up to that code. So back then, were homes built with up to that code, or is it just homes are being built so fast now that they're not thinking about it?
Yeah, back then, homes were built. When they said a 2x4, it was actually a 2-inch by 4-inch piece of lumber, which now we go by nominal. A 2x4 now is 1.5 by 3.5, so it's smaller lumber. And back then, they had real, the real wood. Today you probably couldn't drive a nail in it. And with the demand of lumber, they grow trees a lot faster, and so the lumber is not as strong, and that's the biggest thing. Back then, they had real lumber, so I think that's the biggest thing.
So real lumber, it's amazing to know that now homes are needing to be up to that code, but I guess back then they didn't have to have that now. But I mean, it's always good to make sure a house is safe to live in, because
Yep.
I mean that's where we live, and that's where we want to make sure that everybody's going to be safe in those homes. So we talk about the authority part of building codes. So you guys Your team got new badges, new shirts. There's an authority side to that. You see that badge, you think, okay, these guys, these ladies, people in your department, they are serious about making sure everything's right.
Right.
Talk about the authority side of building and codes department.
You know, we all have families and we have to go home at night, too. So we are the enforcement side of it. When we see, code deficiencies, whether it be on new construction or whether it be a blighted property, it's up to us to enforce that code. We're not the bad guys, but we want a safe product at the end of the day where we can go home because we're going to put our name on it at the end of the day. So we are an enforcement. We're code enforcement. We adopt the code, and it's our job to enforce it. So these certs and stuff, it just kind of gives us when we go on the job, they know who we are, they know why we're there, and that's our job is to enforce the code. So
as far as the enforcement goes, I know JPD, they can, write tickets and arrest. What are some of the things that Building and Codes Department can do to enforce? What are the enforcement tactics?
Our main, sometimes you can get things done with a phone call, but more than not, we send letters out to the owners of the property. Sometimes we get compliance that way, sometimes we don't. A lot of times you have out-of-state owners. We send these letters and it kind of falls on deaf ears. So we do have environmental court, which that gives us a little teeth. If they won't fix their property or if they won't mow their yard or move that car, we can summons them to environmental court, and the judge, he can make a ruling on that case and levy some fines if it need be.
So building and codes and the codes part of it, I just think of our 301 system. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of code compliant things on there like tall grass and of course litter and things like that. Mm-hmm. Talk about some of those codes and why, I guess, why they're important to maintaining the progress of the city.
Yeah, we have a grass ordinance. Grass is not supposed to be over 6 inches tall, but we don't get out there with a tape measure. Some people say, you got a tape measure. You can go by a property and you can tell if the grass is overgrown and if the bushes have not been cut, if there's trash in the yard, if there's broken windows, you can tell that. So just driving by, that's our job, because that's what citizens see when they drive down the road, is they want to see a good-looking city. They want to see a clean city. They want to see the grass, the grass mowed. Your neighbor's yard is immaculate, but next to it you've got tall grass. So, we want the city to look good, and that's the main reason we have code enforcement.
So, at what point can the enforcement from the Building and Codes Department, that authority, what point does it transfer over to, okay, we're going to have to call JPD to actually enforce even a greater fine or whatever it is?
Yeah. If we say we send a letter out and we always call for a hearing inside our office. It's not an official hearing per se, but we call them in and say, hey, what are you going to do with this property? Mm-hmm. A lot of times they don't respond, they don't come in, so we'll send them another notification. They don't come in. So our enforcement is environmental court, and we put them in front of the judge. He has the authority to levy the fines. A lot of times we don't get JPD involved unless it's a vacant house and it looks like a danger. We'll call them to kind of clear the house before we go in it.
And speaking of vacant houses, which kind of transitions to the next topic, buildings and the building part of building codes. Of course, it all runs together. Buildings that are vacant, and I know. Let's just talk about. There was an incident recently here in the city where a citizen was having a get together or a gathering or a party, and they posted online on social media that a city official reached out to them. They had to cancel their party. Mm-hmm. To me, I was like, well, why would a city official cancel a party? I was just wondering that myself. And come to find out, there was a reason behind it, and building codes had a lot to do with it. So, kind of explain and tell citizens why a city official would reach out to them about a building that might not be in compliance with what they're intending it for it to be.
Okay. Yeah. And number one, we're not against anyone going into a building or having an event space or even a business. But think about when you go into these spaces, say it was a warehouse before, or it was some kind of big empty space. It wasn't built to hold a lot of people. The fire exits were not meant to have a lot of people that needed different ways to get out in the case of an emergency. So that's what we look at. You know, the fire protection system. It may be a big building with no sprinkler system, and the code, the way you want to use it now, it calls for a sprinkler system, and it's all to save lives and protect these people that are in there. So, like for instance, I think I know the one you're talking about. It's a big open space, but with only one way out, you know, and no sprinkler system. And so whenever you get a whole lot of group of people together and fire or any other situation breaks out, there's panic. So, you know, there's panic and people are not aware of where the exits are or if there's a sprinkler system in there. So it's best to come talk to us. It's free advice before you go into a space or before you even buy or lease a space. Come talk to us and say, you know, I've got this building. This is what I want to do. And we'll sit down and we'll talk to you about it. And if you want us to come out and look at it and give you a code report, it's $40. It's called a walkthrough permit. We'll meet you on site. We'll give you we'll make you a list of the code deficiencies to use it like you want to use it. So that's what we offer. And like I said, we're not against anyone going into a building, but it's just got to be used, and the code has got to be applied the way it wants to be used.
So overall, it's a safety thing.
It's all safety.
Just want to make you have one exit or one entrance, one exit, no fire sprinkler systems. Something happens, it could, you know, essentially just be a bad situation.
Right. When we've been out to eat before, my wife's been around my code brain for a long time, and we will be sitting down eating, and I say, look around and, you know, find the alternative route from where we came in, because everybody's going to go back the way they came, and you need an alternative way out. So it's something good to think about.
It's one of those things. I don't like sitting with my back to the door, but I'm always looking around, trying to see, you know, there's an exit. You know, people will probably go through the entrance. I'm going to probably go through the kitchen, make sure, you know, there's a back way out. So at that point, you found out, for one, how did you find out, how did the city official, whomever it was, find out about this particular building that made them have to cancel?
Yeah, as you know, social media, they advertise a lot, you know, and that's the ways we find out about a lot of events is social media or someone calling and say, hey, you know, there's an event going there, or flyers, you know, there's flyers out on light poles sometimes that tell us about these events. So that's how we find out about them most of the time.
And again, the city, we're not against people having their events. We want them to, you know, patronize. We want them to enjoy their time here in Jackson. We want them to have fun.
Yep.
But we just want to make sure that everybody's safe.
Everybody's safe. Yep.
So again, the city is not trying to cancel your parties.
No.
We want to make sure everybody, you know, everything's up to code, because we don't want anything, you know, bad happening as far as the building and, you know, the party not going the way it should, or, you know, the fun happening. So, and with that, it seems like building and codes, you work really hand in hand with the fire department. Mm-hmm. Where does that connection come in?
Yeah, we work very close with the fire marshal and his team. We have weekly meetings, you know, with them, and we discuss these situations because the fire marshal and I, we've been out, in fact, on a lot of event centers because, you know, they have skin in the game as well. You know, it's because it's their job to, like say, put out the fire. So they go to a fire call they're expecting a warehouse. Well, there's a bunch of people in there. You know, it's got to be used the way it's supposed to be used. So they look at more of the fire aspects of it. Is it sprinkled? Can I get a fire truck to this location? That type of fire aisles. If we had a bunch of cars, can we even get a fire truck there? So that's a lot of things that we look at together.
So it's not just necessarily the building. It's, you know, working hand in hand with the fire department. It's making sure that you can get to that place, like the parking lot and things like that. Right. So is that kind of this parking lots or parking and things like that? Do those go hand in hand with the code side of building and codes?
Yes, and you know the one we looked at this morning. I won't mention the name, but they wanted to have an event center. Well, the first thing that planning looks at is that parking lot. The building may hold, you know, the way they want to use it. It was a warehouse before, so you didn't really need a whole lot of parking. But now you've got a party for 600 people. That's a lot of vehicles, you know, out in that parking lot. So that's something that planning has to calculate. They have to look at that and make sure that not only is the building, you know, can be used like that, but it with a parking lot accompanying that many people.
And speaking of planning, recently the Department Planning, Growth, and Development, which Stan Pilot, we've had him on a few lessons back, it's kind of over the Planning, Growth, and Development, which includes planning, building codes, and engineering. So all three of you all work hand in hand in making sure things are structurally sound, infrastructure is good, and the planning side of everything. And I always joke when we have tours, I always tell people, you know, the planning department, they're the department to make sure that there's no Walmart built next to your house, or there's no, you know, other big box store built in the cove of an apartment area. There are zones and there are codes and all these different things. So with the codes, as far as back to the residential side of it, you mentioned you start from the ground up. Well, let's just start back to just all the buildings. Residential, you make sure everything's good. But retail and factories, is that the same? Do you all go into those buildings as well to make sure everything's good? Is it just every building in the city of Jackson city limits?
Yeah, I think you and I both attended the grand opening of the Dixie, the Georgia Pacific. Even as big as that building is, 900 and something square feet, we treat it the same. We start from the ground up. We look at every element of that building until the day that we were there, you know, that they could open up. So, yeah, we follow it all the way through.
So following it all the way through, kind of go through, if you don't mind, just if you want to do a residential, if you want to do a factory, what are, in a nutshell, these steps? What do you do from start to finish? And it doesn't have to be the entire process because it takes these buildings a long time to get built. Yeah. But like on a quick note, where do you start and where do you end?
Okay. Yeah. We start at the dirt. You know, that's your foundation. Everything's got to have a good foundation. We look at the footing. They pour the concrete in the footing. And most houses these days are slab. Some do crawl space. A slab that's your floor. It's your concrete floor, where a crawl space is what it is. You have a space to crawl under it, and then you have a floor on top of that. So once we get the concrete, they get that poured. They frame it up. We have a framing inspection at that stage. We look at the insulation. You know, there's energy codes out there now. That's one of the new things that's come in, actually, is the energy code. We look at the wiring in the wall before it's covered up. We look at the plumbing before it's covered up, make sure all the drains are sized right and they fall like they're supposed to. And we actually look at the heat and air. So once all those are in, the sheetrock's on. Basically, it's up to the finishes. You know, once they get finished, we go in, we do a final inspection. We check all the outlets, make sure they work like they're supposed to. We check everything. And then once that's done, the family can move in, and we feel good that we've gave them a safe product.
And so there are different types of the inspections. You listed a few of them. It's kind of electrical, plumbing. Just kind of list those types of inspections that building department looks at.
Yeah, like electrical inspections. You know, we look at the wiring when it goes in the wall. People will never see that. They'll see walls like this. When they're ready to move in the house, they don't know what's behind the walls. So we look at that. When you flush a toilet or turn your sink on, that water goes somewhere. So it's got to drain properly. It's got to be sized properly. And heat and air, when you're cold in the winter or you're hot in the summer, you expect to turn that thermostat and it comes on and it cools your house efficiently. We make sure it's not undersized, to build that square footage house. So that's the things that we look at, to make sure it's the things that you don't see that's hid behind the sheetrock that we look at before the pretty stuff goes on.
Before the pretty stuff goes on.
Yeah.
And I've, working here at City Hall, this actual room right here, I watched it being built, and I watched you do your part. We'll get more into that. So your team, you have how many inspectors?
We have 6 on the construction side, 6 on code enforcement, so 12 total.
So on the construction side, do they work hand in hand, or do they just specifically for codes and the construction side? So if somebody from codes, they're not necessarily testing the outlets, or can you do both?
Yeah, and we're steadily working that way. Mainly, our code enforcement are code enforcement, but they're all certified. They have to get certified just like our other guys do too. So when we need help somewhere, say a big apartment building, there's a lot of receptacles. We'll call in some people to help check those things. So yeah, we can cross over, and that's one of my big things is we're working on cross training, so we can all do different parts of the job.
So speaking of apartments or any building here, there are a lot of buildings, and it seems like they're going up all the time. How often does a contractor or a developer, how often do they call you, or are you just on call and say, hey, I need you to come check this outlet, or do you wait for all the outlets to go in first before that you check it?
Yeah, even on apartments, I did the electrical inspection on this apartment building, and they called in the whole thing, and I said, please, if you can, call in a floor at a time, because I was there for 3 hours because I have a little checker that checks every outlet, and I will check every outlet. So 3 hours later, we ask them to kind of do it in phases, and if they can get it, that way. So that's how we like to do it, especially on bigger projects like that.
Right, and you say you check every outlet. Your bio says you are a licensed master electrician. So
Yeah.
as a master electrician, I'm sure you're going to make sure that every outlet is checked, and if they think they have one hidden, you have to find out. They have to tell you where it is.
Right, and just like a GFI, a GFI receptacle is in wet locations like your kitchens or your bathrooms or outside where water can get to it, or a damp ground. That thing has to trip, because that's what would save a life. If you had someone out there and it's wet and they come in contact with that electrical, it's supposed to trip. And we have devices that'll trip those, and that's really important because it's again life safety. That's life safety stuff.
So building codes it's not just a department. It goes hand in hand with safety, because we're all in buildings, no matter what. We're in somebody's building, whether we're at work, whether we're at home, at play. We're in somebody's building. And also the code side, we're outside, we're at parks. We want to make sure that the grass is cut. So the importance of building codes, in a nutshell, just kind of talk about why your department is so important to citizens in the city.
Yeah, I actually looked up. There's been building codes since the time of the Roman Empire, so they've been around for a long time. So the most important thing, and I guess I've said it a lot of times, is saving lives. And it's like the inspector said, he's not with us anymore. But he said if you can save one life, it's worth it all. So that's the main role. We're not to beat you down. We're not the bad guys. We're all got to work together to build a safe product. And I think that's the most important thing that the building department does. It's got to be safe at the end of the day, because we put our name on it. We have families, and we go home, and we got to sleep at night too. So I think that's the most important thing that we do.
And so 28 years, you've been in the building department. So I think City Hall is not 28 years old. I don't think. Did you start off here in this building, or
Another building.
you started off in another
Yeah.
building? So you watched this building go up.
I did.
So in 28 years, you've been with the building department. So did you have a hand in making sure this building that we're in is up to code? And so when you were doing that, what part or what, you weren't the department head at that point?
No, just
So
an
what did you do?
I was the electrical inspector.
You were
so,
electrical inspector.
yeah, I looked at the electrical and all these walls before they were covered up. And I think I've told you before, I found an old tag in the basement where I actually looked at these walls, and it had my signature on it from I think it was 97 or 98. So, yeah, I've looked at it before, like you said, you see all the pretty stuff.
So how does that make you feel to know that, these buildings, City Hall for one, the one that you work in, that you hear every day, or at least Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
How does it feel to know that this building it's got your hand on it, and making sure all these electrical outlets, and again, this base here is pretty new,
Yep.
but these outlets that are still running, they're still good. How does that make you feel to know that this building is still standing?
Yeah, it makes you feel old, number one, but but it does. It gives you a sense of pride to know that what I looked at a long time ago still stands the test of time. And it's still safe, and that's the biggest thing. It makes me feel proud that we still have a safe building.
And so, just going back, how did you know that building things, being a master electrician, plans examiner for the city, how did you know this is the route that you wanted to do? And then as a plans examiner, what was that? What did you do when you first started?
My background, was electrical. I did actually electrical work before an electrical inspector position came open here, and I applied for it. So that's where I started out, was electrical inspections. Then a plans examiner position came open, so that I moved up to that. And what a plans examiner does is they do an inspection on paper. There's a big, blueprint's a big sheet of paper, but we apply those codes. We do the inspection on paper, so to speak. And if we see deficiencies, we can go ahead and list those before dirt gets moved, before concrete gets poured, before anything gets done. So it's kind of a checklist, before it's an inspection on paper before they actually start.
So you talk about paper and technology, and I'm sure back then paper was all you had.
That's all we had.
So would you walk around with a clipboard? Now, how do you feel technology has played a role in what your department does?
Yeah, we have no more paper plans. We have no more paper applications. Everything is done. That was one of my goals when I took over down there was, hey, we're going to go online permitting. We're going to go, with the help of this administration, they helped make that happen, that, we're going to do online permits, online, and everything we do, when we go do an inspection, we carry an iPad, and we can do that inspection. We can take pictures. We can do it all from right there. Plans review, we actually don't roll out plans anymore. We have some big screen TVs that our plans examiners, they can pull the plan up right there. They can make notes, and they can stamp it just like you would a paper plot. So that has helped a lot. We've got a whole storage room now with nothing in it. So
hey, I love the digital, and the only reason I have paper is so I can actually see the notes on here. I'm not a big paper guy as well. So one last question on the topic of the importance in codes before we get to the pop quiz. What makes the building department say we have to close this structure, this home, this apartment complex, this unit, this building? Where is that line, and how do you make that decision?
Yeah, we've had to post some properties before, and I'll go through a couple examples. With residential wise, if during code enforcement we observe the floors falling in, or the roof is falling in, that's not safe. We don't want anybody to get hurt, so we'll post that property so that no one can enter. We've posted properties where, this is on the commercial side, if they're using it as an event space or somewhere they have a lot of people, and that building's not made for that. It's not sprinkled. It don't have the right paths of egress out. So we'll post it that way. So we can post it for different reasons. You know, if it's a life safety thing or if it's going to collapse. So we use the code kind of to guide that, so we can post it different ways.
Well, building codes, it's a lot to it, but overall, it's safety. It is a safety thing. Make sure that we can live, sleep, move around, have a place, just a building. We want to make sure it's structurally sound. We want to make sure, it doesn't fall over in an earthquake. If it does, it's a big earthquake. But we're making sure that we've checked, crossed our T's, dotted our I's, electrical work, make sure everything is up to code. So, Greg Rowland, thank you again for coming on.
Thank you.
But before we end, we've got pop quiz, and my pop quizzes are just 3 questions that I ask my guests, just kind of to get to know them a little bit better. Yeah. So the first question is, I'm a new dad. I know you're dad as well. What is, I guess, your advice for me? I talked with Stan. One of his 2 words for me are be present, and I've kept those in my heart. From you to me, what is some advice for me as a new dad?
Yeah. For me to you, it would be take that time because it goes by way too quick. Get down in the floor and play board games if they want to play. If they want to go outside, do that. I had 2 boys and I coached them. If it was baseball, football, all the way through, just to get that time with them because I know it goes by quick and then they're gone. So I'm gonna say take that time.
Take that time. I used to always say, well, I still say this, whenever my baby girl is ready to get down and play, I want to be able to get down and color and play with, the toys that she has and things like that. So it's great advice. Next question is, what is the most extreme case of code violation that you have ever dealt with in your 28 years in the building department?
I would have to say there's been several code enforcement situations that you go in and you say there's no way this structure's still standing or there's no way anybody could be in here. But I guess it was a house that looked relatively great on the outside. And we went in it and it was awful. The animals had their way in there and it was pretty bad. So I guess after that inspection, we wanted to go home and burn our clothes, if you would, because it was so bad. The smell was so bad. There was so much stuff in there that it was terrible. So that's one of the memorable ones, but we have seen a lot in our code enforcement side.
And so this particular house, of course, we're not going to say where it is or anything like that. Mm-hmm. What made it so bad? If the things that you can talk about, what made it so bad? It was
abandonment. The owner of the property lived out of state, so it was just a lack of care. You don't visit that house. Like I said, animals had their way with it. The structure was kind of getting some holes in it. Well, animals needed a place to go, and they destroyed the inside of this house, and it looked kind of like a hoarding situation. I don't know if other people were living in there, but there was piles of trash that had rotted and other things that I won't mention. But
you say this was a residential?
Very nice residential house.
Wow. So, and you said this was recent.
Mm-hmm.
So in the 28 years of all the things that you've seen, all the buildings that's gone up and down here in the city, this most recent is probably the most extreme case.
I would say, yeah, this one the most extreme. Yeah.
What one thing is in there that is seared in your head of, wow, I can't believe that was there?
To be honest, it was the animal droppings. I'll be nice. Oh, the piles and piles and piles.
How long do you think it was abandoned?
Years, at least probably 10 years.
And we've had rainstorms and we've had a lot of stuff happen in 10 years.
Yeah, and driving by it, you would never know it. You're like, hey, this is a nice...
So from the outside, it looked
fine. You go in, and it's terrible.
Wow.
I had to stick my head out a window to get a breath.
That bad?
Yep.
So were the windows, were they closed?
Closed.
Just everything... Oh, my God. gosh.
Yeah.
I can only imagine how bad that smell was.
You have other eyewitnesses here at City Hall that can attest to that too.
So how many people did y'all take on this? It was you, just how many? You don't have to
Yeah,
say
it was
who
like
went.
4 or 5.
Okay.
You know, our staff and some other staff.
And at that point, is that one of those residential, like, we got to, like, nobody can enter this place anymore?
Right.
So
Right.
when it's, I know we're still on this topic, but, like, when it's condemned like that, what do you do for the inside? Do you just have somebody come in and clean it out, or what happens?
Yeah. Thankfully, in this case, the owner was there, and they say they're going to get somebody to clean it out. I mean, it would have to be a company to literally that they would hire to go clean this thing out. And if not, it would be we'd get a court order to go in and clean it out. It would have to be somebody that the city would have to employ to do that.
I wonder who that person would be. Wow, that's interesting. So, I have no words. The way you just described it makes me just not even want to think about it. So, third question, pop quiz question.
Yeah.
This again, we talked about it earlier. This room, Suite 305, it used to be the old fitness center for city employees here in City Hall. I remember when I first started, it was, these old 1970s equipment that, I was thinking, hey, yes, I can use this gym to work out. I was too tall for a lot of the equipment. The pull-up side of it, my arms were already bent because it just wasn't working. Bench press part of it, I couldn't even do it right. So it wasn't usable. For me, it wasn't. So you are one of the only people I know that would use this space. I would come up, I would see you on the treadmill. So with that, how important is physical fitness to you?
Yeah, growing up and I guess from youth all the way through high school, I love sports, baseball, football, whatever it is. So it's always been important to me to stay physically active, to stay in shape. And, I guess like during my lunchtime, I was like, hey, I can come up here and I can walk, burn a few calories, stay loosened up. I was playing softball, and I was like, hey, I can kind of get limbered up a little bit, and burn some calories. And like when you go to the doctor and they say, hey, you're a little bit overweight or high cholesterol, that helps those things too. And I do some weight training at home in my garage, but there was some here, and why not take advantage of it if I could use it? Yeah, it was owed, and it was a kind of a struggle to do, but yeah, I would use it every once in a while up here.
And you say you had 2 boys, so I know they kept you active as well. And just with the job that you do, you're going upstairs, you're moving around, you're getting your cardio in when you're checking these buildings and things like that, especially if it's a big warehouse like Dixie. You're walking around the entire building, or it could be you and the team, but you're doing the work. So I guess that physical fitness portion of it's important.
Yeah, it is.
So as an avid gym goer, I totally understand. I'm the same way. I want to make sure I get my workouts in, at least 5 days out of the week. People wonder, how do you do it, Kenny? I just enjoy it. So I take it you just enjoy working out, enjoy just the physical fitness part of it. Right. So building in codes, like I said, it's a lot to it, but overall, the citizens can use this department to make sure that their buildings are safe. If they want to have an event, we're not keeping them away. Want to make sure everything's safe.
That's right.
Greg Rowland, thank you again. I appreciate you coming on. It's a lot to take in with building code, so at some point we'll have you back. We'll probably have a few inspectors just to talk about what they do, specifically, checking in on all the buildings here in the city of Jackson. Yeah. So, Greg, thank you again.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate you for coming on for East Main 101, Lesson 16. And that does it for Lesson 16 of East Main 101. But as you know, there is homework. So for our homework for this lesson is to visit our building and codes department. Say that 3 times fast. Building and Codes Department website, and just browse around. Tell us what you found that you didn't know before. And of course, you can always file 301 complaints. Let me rephrase that. They're not really complaints. Just go to our 301 website and you can just, put in some of those code violations, tall grass, or
Right.
anything that you see on our 301. So it works hand in hand with our building and codes department. So again, that does it for lesson 16 of East Main 101. Don't forget to follow us on all of our social media channels, and be sure to follow us and subscribe to our YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcast channels to listen to each lesson in its entirety. You can visit our website at eastmain101.jacksontn.gov. That does it for lesson 16. And until next week, class dismissed.